Welcome to the debate. Let's start with a scenario that, well, it sounds like it belongs in a dystopian sci-fi novel, but it actually just happened recently.
Right.
Imagine you're in Iran. You have this highly popular prayer calendar app on your phone called Bade Shaba.
Got millions of users on that one.
Exactly. It's an everyday utility sitting active on over 5 million smartphones across the country. Suddenly, right in the middle of the day, the screen lights up with a push notification. But it's not a call to prayer.
No, definitely not.
It's a message directed at the military, demanding they lay down their weapons. And it's accompanied by a broadcast to the public that help has arrived and, a reckoning is here.
It is a totally surreal, jarring digital intrusion. Absolutely. But I want to contrast that invisible manipulation with what's happening simultaneously hundreds of miles away in central Israel. Suggested visual, night vision footage of kinetic explosions and anti-air interceptions over a city.
The physical reality.
Exactly. The physical reality of war literally tearing through the sky. Hezbollah rockets are striking deep into populated neighborhoods. But the most terrifying detail for the people on the ground isn't just the kinetic explosion.
It's the silence.
Yes, the silence that came right before it. The early warning sirens, which are the absolute backbone of keeping civilians alive at a conflict zone, they simply never triggered.
And that staggering contrast is exactly what we are dissecting today. We're looking at the dual nature of modern conflict. Specifically, we're debating the explosive rise and the true strategic value of cyber warfare.
As suggested on-screen text, cyber warfare, the invisible front line.
Which is a domain that's really been thrust into the global spotlight by the escalating conflict between Israel, the United States, and Iran.
Right. Now, I am taking the position today that cyber operations have fundamentally transformed the nature of conflict. They are no longer just an accessory to warfare or, a neat trick for spies.
You're saying they're the main event.
I'm arguing they're the decisive, foundational layer that dictates the success or failure of all modern physical military operations. Without it, the physical military just fails. And I'll be arguing from a very different perspective. I think the strategic impact of cyber warfare is drastically inflated. It is heavily pushed by a profit-driven cybersecurity industry that frankly thrives on selling fear to governments and corporations.
Well, they do sell a lot of software.
They do. And yes, cyber tactics generate flashy, disruptive headlines, but structurally they remain a secondary tool. Much of what we call cyber warfare is essentially psychological operations.
Interesting.
And when you look closely, that digital disruption really pales in comparison to the devastating, decisive reality of traditional kinetic firepower.
Let's get right into it then. Let me lay out why cyber is the indispensable first mover of modern conflict. When we look at the operations currently being conducted by the U.S. and Israel and Iran, military leadership explicitly describes them as synchronized.
Layered from seabed to space, right?
Yes, seabed to space and cyberspace. The physical strikes, the jets, the bombs, they don't just happen in a vacuum. Let's look at how deep cyber infiltration enables the physical military.
Okay.
Israel's Unit 8200, their elite cyber and signals intelligence unit, working alongside Mossad. They didn't just guess where senior Iranian leadership targets were hiding.
Suggested visual, archival-style footage of server farms intercut with mobile missile launchers.
Well, they relied on intelligence, as militaries always have. That part isn't new.
Right, but the mechanism of that intelligence is entirely new. They executed massive systemic hacks into Iranian CCTV networks, municipal traffic cameras, and private security systems.
Just ingesting all that visual data. Petabytes of visual data. By running that through analytics, they built what the intelligence community calls patterns of life. They are cross-referencing a license plate captured at an intersection with a cell phone ping from a nearby cell tower.
So tracking targets minute by minute.
Exactly. That invisible digital penetration is the exact mechanism that enabled the devastating precision decapitation strikes against senior leaders. Without that digital dominance, the physical military is effectively blind. It's just swinging in the dark.
I understand the appeal of that narrative, I really do, but we need to draw a hard line between intelligence gathering, which you're describing perfectly, and the offensive deployment of cyber as a weapon.
You don't think they're two sides of the same coin?
No, the reputation of cyber warfare, particularly regarding a supposed cyber superpower like Iran, is vastly exaggerated. When we examine what these offensive cyber operations actually achieve on the ground, they are largely disruptive. They are not strategically decisive.
I'd push back on that.
Well, think about what a state-sponsored cyber attack usually looks like in reality. It's defacing a government homepage, or it's a wiper attack.
Which, as we know, can paralyze an entire organization. Suggested on-screen text, Unit 8200 versus hacktivists.
It can cause administrative headaches, sure. A decade ago, Iranian hackers deployed malware that deleted the data of a U.S. casino, reportedly in retaliation for comments made by its owner.
The Sands Casino, yeah.
Right. Or look at the 2012 attack on Saudi Aramco or basic ransomware campaigns. These are nuisances. Iran deliberately compromises minor, completely insignificant parts of critical infrastructure.
Like a municipal water facility or something.
Exactly. Maybe they breach one or two legacy machines. Why? So they can immediately launch an exaggerated social media campaign claiming they've poisoned or crippled the entire system.
So you're saying it's mostly PR?
The goal is entirely psychological. Yeah, is to stoke chaos and fear among the civilian population, but true destruction, that still requires physical munitions.
Right, but
Let me just finish this thought. The Iranian cluster bombs that are forcing civilians into shelters in central Israel right now, those are what physically shred infrastructure and end human lives. A hacked database doesn't collapse an apartment building.
if you're listening to this, you might be thinking exactly what you just said. A bomb blows up a building, a hack just causes an administrative annoyance. But I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective.
Go ahead.
If kinetic weapons, the missiles and the bombs, are the fist, cyber is the optic nerve. Without penetrating those Iranian traffic networks, the fist swings entirely blind.
Okay, I see the analogy.
And the sheer scale of how this intelligence dominance functions today changes the math of war entirely. The Pentagon is actively transitioning into an AI-first warfighting force. Suggests as visual, graphics showing data nodes connecting across a map of the Middle East.
Let's be precise about what AI first means in a combat theater, though, because that term is a massive magnet for hyperbole.
Fair point, fair point. We aren't talking about sci-fi Terminators. We are talking about utilizing advanced artificial intelligence tools, specifically large language models and multimodal AI, like Anthropic's Claude or similar classified architectures.
To process data.
Yes, to rapidly ingest and analyze vast oceans of data. We are talking about open-source satellite imagery, translated intercepted radio chatter, and hacked security feeds.
Stuff humans just can't get through fast enough.
Exactly. The sheer volume of this data is completely beyond human processing capability. You can have 1,000 analysts in a room, and they wouldn't process in a lifetime what these models process in an hour.
Right.
The AI tools are hunting for anomalies, fixing exact coordinates in real time, and feeding that targeting data directly to the fighter jets.
But again, you were describing a highly sophisticated telescope. A telescope is not a gun.
It is when the telescope is connected directly to the trigger. And regarding the psychological aspect you mentioned earlier, hacking the Beta Scalpa prayer app to send surrender notifications isn't just a nuisance or a PR stunt.
You think it has real strategic value?
I do. That is a mass disruption of command and control. By pushing that message to 5 million Iranian citizens and soldiers, you are bypassing state television, you are bypassing the adversary's sensors, and you are reaching straight into their pockets.
Okay, that is a compelling way to frame it.
You are neutralizing the enemy's organizational will before your troops even cross a border. That's huge.
Suggested on-screen text, information operations versus hard intel. Have you considered how much of this offensive cyber posture is a carefully constructed illusion, though? The intelligence processing you're talking about is very real, but the offensive deployment of cyber is heavily reliant on smoke and mirrors.
What do you mean by illusion?
When nations like Iran conduct these operations, they almost never do it under their own flag. Because of the inherent ambiguity of the internet, they hide behind fictitious hacktivist proxies or fake cybercriminal personas.
Oh, you're referring to false flag operations.
Exactly. Look at the 2022 cyber attack on Albania's government networks. A persona calling itself Homeland Justice claimed responsibility for the attack.
Right, I remember that.
They wiped government data, leaked it, with a bunch of political messaging, and deliberately tried to frame it as a grassroots ransomware incident by angry dissidents.
But it was state-sponsored?
But it was, in reality, state-sponsored information warfare, masquerading as a hard military strike. They route the attack through servers in third-party countries to make attribution incredibly difficult. They use that digital ambiguity to inflate their own power on the world stage.
But regardless of the mask they wore, the Albanian government networks were still paralyzed. The impact was real.
The impact was a temporary disruption. But here is the critical piece. These states rely on the fact that the Western cybersecurity industry will echo and amplify the threat for them.
Ah, back to the industry inflation argument.
We are talking about an industry that makes billions of dollars selling defensive software and consulting services. It creates a massive feedback loop of fear. A minor server breach happens, a state-sponsored group posts a threatening video on Telegram under a fake name, and suddenly the industry and the media are treating it like a digital Pearl Harbor. It is inflation by design.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning. Because destroying a nation's digital economy, like plunging an oil giant into weeks of absolute chaos, can bleed a country just as effectively as a physical bombing campaign. Doesn't economic and infrastructural paralysis equal military defeat? Suggested visual. Footage of corporate buildings in the Gulf juxtaposed with emergency responders.
That's a stretch, is it?
We have to look at what happens when these cyber attacks move past intelligence gathering and directly target critical infrastructure. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, has recently shifted its strategy to explicitly target the cloud servers and physical offices of Western tech giants operating in the Gulf. We're talking about Google, Microsoft, IBM.
But targeting a cloud server is fundamentally different from destroying a power plant.
By threatening these entities and warning that they will target banks, hospitals, and financial institutions across the Middle East, they are threatening the very foundation of the global economy.
It's a threat, yes.
Let's unpack the wiper attacks you mentioned earlier, because I think the nuisance label severely underestimates the mechanics. A wiper attack doesn't just encrypt your files and ask for a Bitcoin ransom like a criminal gang would.
Right, it's not ransomware.
It is designed for pure destruction. It targets the master boot record, the fundamental map your computer's hard drive uses to find its own operating system.
It corrupts the foundation of the machine.
Right. When that record is erased, the machine literally forgets how to turn on. It is bricked. It becomes a very expensive paperweight. You mentioned the 2012 Aramco attack.
Yeah, the Shamoon virus.
Exactly. They didn't just cause an administrative headache. They wiped the master boot records of 30,000 computers. They plunged one of the world's most critical oil giants into weeks of absolute chaos.
They were using fax machines, I recall.
Employees were using typewriters and fax machines to manage global oil shipments. Now imagine that scale of attack today, hitting a national power grid or a major financial hub. The damage is catastrophic. That is a digital equivalent of a naval blockade.
I hear the theoretical danger in that, absolutely. But let's look at the stark contrast between the theoretical fear of a cyber blockade and the reality of how these nations actually choose to degrade their enemies when the stakes are existential.
Okay, let's look at it.
When Iran wanted to genuinely degrade Israel's intelligence and defensive infrastructure in this current conflict, what did they do? They didn't send a sophisticated phishing email to take down cloud servers. They didn't deploy a master boot record wiper to brick the computers.
They launched physical strikes.
Exactly. They launched destructive drone swarms and ballistic missiles. They physically targeted Amman, Israel's military intelligence directorate. They physically targeted the headquarters of Unit 8200, the very cyber operators who build those patterns of life you mentioned.
True.
They aimed at the Green Pine radar systems, which serve as the early warning backbone of the Arrow missile defense system. When the chips are down and a nation needs to eliminate a strategic threat to its survival, they do not rely on code. They rely on physical explosives. We have to ground this in human reality. Suggested visual. Split screen tracking a digital network going dark, immediately followed by footage of a fighter jet taking off.
But human reality is increasingly digital.
Not when your life is on the line. It's actually wild when you think about the scale of panic a physical weapon causes versus a digital one. When the sirens wail in a city like Bat Yam, a 90-year-old Holocaust survivor isn't struggling to reach a bomb shelter because a Microsoft cloud server was hacked.
No, of course not.
She is running because Iranian cluster bombs munitions physically designed to rip through concrete, metal, and human bodies are falling from the sky. The physical threat is immediate, lethal, and undeniable in a way that taking a banking website offline simply is not.
I agree that the physical reality of a bomb is horrifying, and I'm not minimizing that. But let's go back to the Green Pine radar systems you just brought up, because this perfectly illustrates my point about how warfare has evolved.
All right.
That's an interesting point, though I would frame it differently. Think of a cyber attack as the anesthesia before the surgery. You don't just put the patient to sleep, you chemically paralyze the nervous system so the brain doesn't even register that the body is being cut open.
So you're arguing that cyber is the prerequisite for the kinetic strike to succeed?
Yes, you might argue the physical scalpel, the kinetic bomb, does the real damage. But the surgery is completely impossible without the anesthesia neutralizing the patient's nervous system first.
That's a strong claim.
It is the ultimate culmination of modern war, the seamless integration of cyber and kinetic operations. When the U.S. and Israel launched their historic offensive, where we saw 200 fighter jets striking deep into Iranian territory, targeting the IRGC Air Command centers, who went first?
Cyber Command.
U.S. Cyber Command and Space Command acted as the first movers. They layered non-kinetic effects precisely to disrupt, degrade, and blind Iran's ability to see the attack coming.
Suggested on-screen text, the first movers of war.
By interfering with their detection nodes. Exactly. They used electronic warfare and targeted cyber intrusions to inject false data into the adversary's early warning systems. They effectively shut down the enemy's central nervous system.
Right.
The radar screens on the ground showed clear skies while 200 jets were crossing the border. And it works both ways. The fact that Hezbollah rockets later hit central Israel without the warning siren sounding, the incident we opened the show with, is another prime example of this synergy.
A terrifying one.
Whether it was achieved through a direct cyber infiltration of the siren network or electronic warfare spoofing the detection systems, the digital failure enabled the physical strike to be exponentially more terrifying and effective. The code dictates whether the bomb hits its target or gets intercepted.
Hold on, let me stop you there. I fully acknowledge the synergy. It is a brilliant tactical evolution. But the events of this very conflict prove something fundamental. Once the missiles actually launch, the cyber element pales into near insignificance.
How so?
Let's look at Iran's response to those 200 jets. For years, Iran has been touted by Western intelligence as this formidable cyber superpower, constantly engaging in a shadow war of code. Yet, during the heaviest U.S. and Israeli bombardments, where was Iran's legendary cyber army?
Well, one